was interesting, the last shots we saw there was of Prince Edward and his family, and it's been really interesting the last week to see some of the insights a lot of us didn't know, I particularly didn't know this, of how close Prince Edward was to both his father and his mother.
Well, what I find really interesting is actually how close his wife, Sophie Wessex, was and is to the Queen. She was the first person to sort of officially speak to the media after the sad news. Some people have said because she actually had that real world experience, she married into the royal family, that actually the Queen really values her opinion. But I think the Queen is close to all her children. But the fact is that the Wessexes live very close to her in Windsor Castle. They live just down the road, as you can be, with a gigantic park and a castle. But I think we really have seen a different side to the people who we'd normally see. Actually, you've noticed how William and Harry have made their statements, and that's it. We've had the photograph that the Duchess of Cambridge produced of the grandchildren, which was so lovely, and it showed the fact that this is a family funeral, and this is someone's grandfather and great grandfather who's died. But actually, they've really put the focus on kind of like, well, Prince of Wales is giving eulogy and gave a very moving speech. It's almost like, who isn't involved in a controversy that we can send out to look at things? I didn't think of it like that until I thought, well, actually, in my role as a press officer, who would I send out to go and do public appearances? And they are probably the least controversial right now, as well as being very reliable for the Queen.
We'll talk about the Queen because she will be sitting alone. The guest list is only 30, as we know, but obviously due to COVID regulations, yes, she will be on her own.
Yes, I mean, I can't imagine anyone having to sit through a funeral of your strength and stay on your own and not even be able to hold someone's hand. Yes, she's the Queen. Yes, she's on the stamps and the money and what have you, but she's a human. She's lost her husband of over 7 decades. And I just kind of I wish she had someone there that she could at least take her hand. So there's only going to be 30 guests in the funeral. Of course, that doesn't include people holding the ceremony, the pallbearers. But what I think is really important is that actually outside and the ceremony leading up to before they go into the chapel is going to be so many members of Prince Philip's military family.
Yeah, I think a lot of people thought Princess Anne may be sitting right next to her mother, but that doesn't seem to be the case. What about some of the other lesser-known royals like Eugenie? I've really enjoyed reading some of the messages from people like her. Like she was so normal when she came out. She said, when I started to burn the sausages, Grandpa had come and help. It's been an insight into his personality and his relationships all through the family tree.
I think what we've seen since the sad passing is so many of us have had a view of Prince Philip, and all of a sudden we've seen a completely different side of him from people that knew him best, from people whose lives he maybe just touched briefly. But you know what? There's been so many lovely stories. I loved Eugenie's tribute. I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was touching. I must say, she really does seem to have that ability to connect with people. People said it of her when she was at university. Apparently someone asked her what she was doing for how she was celebrating the Jubilee, and she said, I'm going to be having a party with my gran, because they didn't actually know that she was a princess, and the gran happened to be Her Majesty the Queen. William and Charles, because they're directly in line, they have to obviously take much more of a sort of, it's very much the pomp and ceremony, the respectable view of things. But for the others, that little bit step back, it can be more about, there's been a lot about barbecues, actually. It has been a lot more about that. The other people at the funeral, I think it's really nice that there are some of his side of the family there, because, of course, he had such a sort of a turbulent upbringing, but it's great that it's not just, the family he married into and then descendants from that marriage.
Close to 100 years of life. Prince Philip started off with a rough childhood. He had a challenging life. He obviously was married to his wife, the Queen, for 73 years. A lot of commentators are saying he was shy. He had the witty sense of humour. He spoke to people the same regarding, it doesn't matter who they were. How do you think he will be remembered mostly?
I think he will be remembered as a family man, as a man who obviously had a really big involvement in his children's upbringing, in the sense that, actually, because it was his wife who was sort of, doing the day job, as it were, as the Queen, he actually took more of the responsibility with regards to things like schooling. The children went up to school in Scotland, where he went to school. I think you can see from the tributes from the grandchildren, you can see from the photos of the great-grandchildren, he really was a family man. For me personally, I loved looking back at the things he said. Yep, some of them weren't to everyone's cup of tea, but some of them were just absolutely hilarious. And what pretty much everyone universally, you're always going to get some trolls making silly comments, pretty much said is, my goodness, one, that as a couple they loved each other and they could really set people at ease.
Yeah, and very few people get anywhere near that kind of age. So it's been a life well lived and a celebration of his life, of course. Yeah. Annabelle, thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure.
And for complete live coverage of Prince Philip's funeral service, tune into Sky News tonight from 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or our replay 6 a.m. tomorrow morning.